Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kevin Thompson, Membership Director at the American Ceramic Society. Today's webinar, entitled Growing Your Manufacturing Business with Modern Marketing and Sales, is presented free of charge for ACER's members. This webinar is presented by Douglas Burdett. Douglas is the founder and principal of Artillery, a manufacturing marketing agency in Norfolk, Virginia, and is the host of the Marketing Book Podcast, which was named by LinkedIn as one of the 10 podcasts that will make you a better marketer, and also by Forbes as one of 11 smart podcasts that will keep you in the know. Every week, he publishes an interview with the author of a new marketing or sales book. He has published over 250 interviews and has read every single book featured on the show. The podcast now has over 1 million downloads and listeners in over 150 countries. Prior to starting his own firm, Douglas worked in New York City on Madison Avenue at ad agency giants J. Walter Thompson and Gray Advertising. Today's webinar will be recorded and available to members on the ACER's website. You'll have a chance to ask questions at the end of this presentation. Please use the raise your hand option and we'll unmute you. You may type your questions into the question and answers or chat areas on your screen. We hope you enjoy the webinar and gain valuable new tools and ideas that you can use in your sales and marketing efforts. At this time, I'll turn things over to our presenter, Douglas Burdett.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Yolanda. Hello. Thanks for joining us on this webinar about growing your manufacturing business with modern marketing and sales based on the first 250 marketing and sales books that have been on the Marketing Book Podcast. My goal for this webinar is to provide you with some of the most important concepts and ideas about modern marketing and sales to help you successfully leverage them to grow your business. The things I'm going to talk about include concepts where a lot of companies are either wildly successful or where a lot of companies are struggling as it relates to modern marketing and sales. So if you're not struggling with these things, you should feel good. And if you are, you're not alone. We're going to talk more about key strategies than specific tactics, because the strategies will apply to nearly every business now and in the foreseeable future. Tactics, on the other hand, come and go more quickly and won't apply equally to every company's situation. And also, if you have the right strategies in place, the best tactics tend to reveal themselves much more easily. But if you have any questions at all about tactics you're considering, I'm happy to answer them in the Q&A period after my prepared remarks. So the agenda, briefly, we all know marketing and sales has changed. Why has it changed? What is the most important thing for success in sales and marketing? How should I prioritize my sales and marketing efforts? And what are the different ways of generating leads? And particularly important for manufacturers, how can I sell more through channel partners? These are 5 of the questions I get a lot. And we're going to tackle these. And then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So as Kevin mentioned, my name's Douglas Burdett. My day job is running a marketing agency called Artillery, and our focus is manufacturers and industrial companies who are serious about growing. And I've been in the agency business for over 30 years. Now, on a personal note, about 10 years ago, in lieu of a midlife crisis, I started performing stand-up comedy. I'm all better now, thanks. And I no longer perform stand-up comedy, but I do still channel some of that into my public speaking and my podcast, and I might even sneak a few in here, a few jokes. But if you ever meet my wife, or if you ever met my wife, she would counsel you not to laugh at my jokes because it only encourages me. And since I can't hear most of you, that won't be a problem. So for the last 5 years, I've been the host of the Marketing Book Podcast, as Kevin mentioned. I have read every book that's been on the show, 250 plus books. No, in answer to your unasked question, when I started the podcast, I did not realize I was actually going to need to read each book. Oh, well, it was kind of like missing the right exit on the interstate, realizing you have to drive for a while. And yes, that's really cut into my scotch drinking. So, but enough about me. Let's talk about my friend Frank. Frank and I were buddies in college. Here's a picture of us at a football game not too long ago. In school, Frank studied electrical engineering, and he's had a really successful career. And not too long ago, he called me and told me that he'd become the president of a manufacturing company. And he wanted to ask me about marketing. Basically, he wanted to know what was really important. What they should be focusing on. What can they not worry about? And he said something an electrical engineer would say. He said, "Doug, separate the signal from the noise for me." So I explained to him a lot of what I'm about to share with you, and he really appreciated it and felt like, maybe marketing wasn't so confusing and overwhelming, and that he felt like he had a better handle on it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by all this modern marketing and the changing way people buy, you're not alone. And I hope that I can separate the signal from the noise for you, because if you're new to this or have suddenly been thrust into a marketing or sales role, it can really be overwhelming. So I loved being able to help Frank and get him pointed in the right direction. And I hope I can do the same for you. So why has marketing and sales changed? Okay, get ready to type into your chat pane, because I'm going to be asking you some questions, and I want some audience participation. The most important thing that has changed, that has happened in the world of marketing and sales, okay, this is the most important thing, is that the way your customers buy has changed. The way your customers buy has changed. And that is what many companies are still struggling with. So let me give you an example. When I was a kid, rocking a bow tie, and my dad wanted to buy a car, where was the first place he would go to get information? Type that into your chat pane. When I was a kid and my dad wanted to buy a car, where did he have to go pretty early on to get information? Right, right. Dan says the local dealer. Absolutely, absolutely. The dealership. Thanks, Jorgen. And so why did he have to go to the car dealership? Why did he have to go there? Tell me why you think he had to go there. No Sears Roebuck catalog or internet. Thanks, Dana. That's right. That was the only place he could get information. And that is what Daniel Pink in his book To Sell is Human refers to as information asymmetry. So this lasted for a long time. That's where the buyer wanted information and the seller had it. And the seller used that information as leverage to guide or strong arm the buyer toward a purchase. Okay, let's fast forward to a couple years ago when my wife wanted to buy a car. Where was the absolute last place she went to get information? Where do you think the last place is that she went to get information? The dealership. That's right. That's right. Okay, now tell me, where do you suppose she did get her information? Where did she go to get information? Auto Trader, right, Dan? Internet, Dana, right? Yeah. Car Gurus, right. I'll tell you one place she didn't go also. She didn't go to the dealership, and she didn't go to her husband. I didn't know about this until the last minute, but that's a separate issue. So back to Daniel Pink's book, To Sell is Human. We are now in an era of what he calls information symmetry, where everyone has access to the same information. And because of the dramatically different way people buy now, sales and marketing have been forced to change. It's really all about that. So Jamie Shanks, the author of Spear Selling, the ultimate account-based guide for the modern digital sales professional, wrote that your buyer has evolved more in the last 10 years than in the previous 100 years. And in an Adobe study called Digital Distress, What Keeps Marketers Up at Night, 76% of marketers think that marketing has changed more in the past 2 years than in the previous 50. So let's look at some numbers to illustrate the changing way that your customers are buying. Many of you may have heard about the landmark study a few years ago from CEB, which is now part of Gartner, about how in a B2B buying situation, the buyers are at minimum 57% through their purchase process before first reaching out to the seller. Now, Forrester puts that number as 90%. Obviously, it varies by industry and product, of course, but here are a few other things to add more light to that. According to Google, in a study they did with Millward Brown, 89% of all B2B purchases start with an internet search. Google says 84% of buyers engage in online information consumption and education. And by a factor of 3 to 1, B2B buyers say that gathering information online on their own is superior to interacting with a sales representative. That's from Forrester. And Forrester also says 59% of B2B buyers explicitly indicate that they do not want to interact with a sales representative as their primary source of research. And if, like many manufacturers, you're marketing and selling to engineers, my friends at True Marketing, in conjunction with IEEE Global Spec in their Smart Marketing for Engineers study that they update every year, they revealed that for the majority of engineers, nearly 60% of their buying process happens before they speak to a potential vendor. Excuse me. And what are the primary places they're getting their information from? Well, I know this slide may be a little difficult to see, but the top two are search engines and vendor websites. Search engines and vendor websites. So let's step back for just a minute and talk about marketing. I hear from a lot of manufacturers, many of whom have declining sales or who are serious about growing. Excuse me. And they claim, excuse me, I hear this all the time. They claim they've never done any marketing before. But they actually have, and they're selling themselves short. Let me explain what I mean by that. In 1960, this marketing professor named E. Jerome McCarthy introduced the concept of the 4 Ps of marketing mix in his book, you see there, Basic Marketing Managerial Approach. And the 4 Ps of marketing, and they're in this order for a reason. The first P of marketing is your product. And this refers to the features and the benefits and the unique value proposition of what you're selling. Good, service, product. Second is the price. So this is how much the customer pays and includes how they pay. The third is the place. And what that means is how you distribute it. How can your customers get their product? Are you selling online? Are you selling in stores? Do the purchasers buy at trade shows? Or do you have an inside sales team? Are you selling through channels? And finally, the 4th P is promotion. And this is how you're telling your customers about your product. And the truth is most companies associate marketing with just that last P, promotion, when in fact, any decisions related to your product, its pricing, and its distribution are also a part of marketing. So you can see how marketing, which involves everything related to your product, your pricing, its distribution, and the promotion of it, is central to the operations and growth of any company. So even if your company doesn't have a marketing department or you're not paying to promote your products and services, your company is making marketing decisions every day. And that's why Hewlett-Packard co-founder David Packard many years ago famously said that marketing is too important to be left to the marketing department. And I'm not casting aspersions on the marketing department. I think most marketers I know are doing everything they can to get more involvement from their companies. So let's talk about the one thing business owners and managers want more than anything else, which is growth. Now, what I'm about to tell you might surprise you coming from a marketing guy, but growth doesn't happen simply by doing more of the marketing and sales tactics that you're currently doing. Maybe a little bit more sales, but in nearly all cases, manufacturers grow in any business by adopting the right strategies. And when they do that, their marketing and sales efforts are exponentially more effective. So in order to grow strategically versus opportunistically, you'll be much more successful with the right growth strategies at the right time. And we're not going to talk too much about this, but I want to tell you about Tiffany Bova's book, Growth IQ. Great book. She lays out the 10 ways that companies grow. Now, we're not going to go through each one of these in depth here, but I do want to talk about the first 2 strategies in her book, which are in the upper right-hand side there. Customer experience and customer-based penetration. Customer experience, some of the fastest growing, most innovative companies are focusing on how to engineer a better experience for their customers. In Nicholas Webb's book, What Customers Crave, he cites a study that 70% of Americans are willing to pay more to get a better customer experience. And I know that flies in the face to what a lot of your salespeople will tell you, but because they're always complaining that it's a pricing issue, but more often than not, it's not, and I can explain why later. Think about how Disney or your favorite restaurant keeps you coming back and telling others about it. That doesn't usually happen by accident. You know, the really successful companies, the ones that are growing, are focused on engineering increasingly better experiences for their customers. So how do you go about doing that? Well, there have been entire books written about it, but one idea in Roger Dooley's book, Friction, The Untapped Force That Can Be Your Most Powerful Advantage, he demonstrates how constantly looking for any sign of friction that your customers are having buying from you or from your competitors can have an enormous impact on the growth of your company. And that's not necessarily your product. It may be more likely the way you're delivering your product. And another great starting point for engineering a better product experience, believe it or not, is mentioned in Scott McKain's book, Iconic, and that's to find out what infuriates your customers. Now, it might not necessarily, you might not be infuriating them, but find out what really is bothering them. What do they hate? You might be able to help with some of that. Do you know the answer to that? You shouldn't be afraid to ask. Ask them. It'll be a big differentiator. So the second strategy in Tiffany Bova's book is customer-based penetration. Sell more existing products to existing customers. Okay, let's go back to your chat pane. I want to ask you this question. Okay, get your fingers warmed up there. What are two of the sweetest words to your CEOs and your CFOs? Tell me what two of the sweetest words your CEOs and CFOs are. What do they think about? Profit margin, good. All right, who typed in vodka tonic? No, that is not. I tell you, you guys got some comedians out there. Profit margin, yes, that's good. Two of the sweetest words. Sales target, excellent. You're talking. Yeah, actually, let's take a quick break. I think there's a question. Let me take a question. Yolanda's messaging me that there's a question.
Michael
Fire away.
Carson, it looks like you have a question. I'm going to unmute you. Michael Carson, it looks like I'm having trouble unmuting you. If you have a question, if you could type it into either the question and answer or the chat, we'll make sure we get it answered.
Okay, good. Sometimes there's an audio visual. Okay, two of the sweetest words to your CEOs and CFOs are revenue growth, but the other answers I had were good except for the vodka tonic. Three of the sweetest words to them are fast revenue growth. So if I were suddenly in charge of sales or marketing at a manufacturing or an industrial company, believe it or not, before I'd spend a nickel on marketing to get new customers, I would ask the following question. Are we selling as much as we possibly can to our existing customers? Are we selling as much as we possibly can to our existing customers? Back to Nick Webb's book, he explains that based on several studies, the probability of selling to a new customer is less than 20%, but the probability of selling to an existing customer can be as high as 60 to 70%. And the sales cycles are generally much, much shorter when selling to an existing customer. So my question to you is, what are you doing to sell more to your current customers? And before we leave the topic of Tiffany Bova's book about growth strategies, I want to mention something that is important for growing your company. In every one of those 10 sections in her book about how companies grow, she shows examples of companies that are succeeding and failing at each strategy. And even big companies, she talks about how Amazon and Starbucks have really screwed up some of these strategies and others that have gotten it right. But at the core of each successful execution of those 10 different growth strategies are companies that had the best understanding of their customers, period. The companies that fail were consistently the ones that had the poorest understanding of their customers. And that is the most important concept for success in marketing and sales. The most successful companies have the deepest insights into their customers. Shout out to my Star Trek fans there. In Seth Godin's latest book, This is Marketing, You Can't Be Seen Until You Learn to See, he writes, marketing, the effective kind, is about understanding our customers' worldview and desires so we can connect with them. It's focused on being missed when you're gone, on bringing more than people expect to those who trust us. It seeks volunteers, not victims. Okay, there's 3 kinds of companies. There's 10 ways to grow, but there's really only 3 kinds of companies. And I'm going to explain this. And I want you to think about which kind of company you're in. There are companies that are primarily focused on themselves, their own products, their own operations, and I think this is the largest number of companies. There are companies that are focused primarily on their competitors. That doesn't mean they're not focused on themselves, but they're more focused on their competitors. And they'll never admit it, but a lot of their strategic decisions are based on what the competition's doing first and foremost. And there are companies that are focused primarily on their customers. Doesn't mean they're not looking at those first 2, but they're really, their top priority is focusing on their customers. Let me ask you something. Which kind of company do you think Amazon is? Which one of those 3 do you think Amazon is? Go into your chat pane and tell me which one you think it is. Dana, you're correct. Customers. Amazon, legend has it that when Jeff Bezos attends an internal meeting, he's the founder of Amazon, he insists on there being at least one empty chair in the room, and that empty chair represents the customer. Invariably during meetings, he'll point at that chair to remind people that their primary focus needs to be the customer. And he has said, our number 1 conviction and idea and philosophy and principle is customer obsession, as opposed to competitor obsession. And the last time I checked, Jeff Bezos is one of the richest people in the world. So in this era of the customer, companies who are focused on and have a deep understanding of their customers are the most successful. So how can your company start to develop a deeper understanding of your customers in order to give you a competitive edge? I just want to offer up one idea, one tool, one book that I have seen have the most profitable effect for clients and for other companies as well. And that's the concept of a buyer persona. Now, some of you, if you're marketers, you may have heard of this idea of a buyer persona, buyer profile. In Adele Ravella's best-selling book, Buyer Personas, she explains that buyer personas are examples or archetypes of real buyers that allow marketers to craft strategies to promote products and services to the people who might buy them. And we don't have time to go through the whole book here, but I did want to mention what I think is the linchpin, and that's the 5 rings of buying insight. And if you go to her website, buyerpersona.com, you can download an ebook she's got about these. But we have used these, and don't believe digital marketers who tell you there's some secret sauce they have. There isn't, but this is pretty close to it, and we've seen it work. It's just amazing. And it's these 5 ideas that you need to probe for, and you don't let your salespeople do it because they're busy and they have other skills. You need to actually go and interview these people and do it the way she explains in her book. But the 5 things here are what they call the priority initiative, which is, if any of you studied physics, you know that a body at rest stays at rest. And the same goes for your customers. They have a lot of problems and conflicting priorities, but something gets them to have the priority bubble up to the point where they're actually going to take action, start researching and figuring out how to buy something new. I mean, like, we'll say it's a production facility that's shut down, and that would be a priority initiative. But what is it? Go back to the scene of the crime. What is it that prompts them to actually go take on this? Most people are very comfortable with the status quo and can live with a lot of pain in their business life. Success factors are, what are those emotional things that the buyer is looking for? And it doesn't mean like lower cost and that sort of thing. What is it from an emotional standpoint they're looking? Are they looking for more esteem from their colleague? Are they looking to get a promotion? Are they terrified of making a mistake? Are they looking for greater control? See, those are the real success factors that you want to get a handle on. Perceived barriers is really interesting because those are where you probe for why do you think you can't buy our product? And very often, it's not for a legitimate reason. It's just think they can't buy them. they think they can't buy your product. But that's, sometimes it's bad news, but that's very important because if there's something you need to disarm in the marketing and sales process, you need to understand what those perceived barriers are. The buyer's journey you may have heard of, that's what happens? Who are all the people involved? What kind of time frame is involved? How do they go about researching all this sort of information? And the last one is decision criteria, and that's, think of some judges on the sideline. What is it that they actually use to determine what tips it in your favor? And spoiler alert, it's not often what companies think. There's an expression that your customers aren't necessarily buying what you're selling. So there's something else that they're using to make the decision. Anyway, you don't have to be perfect at this, but even if you get this down just a little bit, it gives you an unfair advantage. So there have been lots and lots of books on the Marketing Book Podcast that explain that the key to growth is really just understanding your customers and the friction in their lives. And I can't talk about all of them, but the truth is most companies don't know as much about their customers as they'd like to know or that they think they do. But the linchpin of success is companies who are able to spend more time with their customers, observe them, and glean insights to help better understand their world. So another question I often get is, how should I prioritize my sales and marketing efforts? So I've already mentioned that for faster revenue growth, the first priority for marketing and sales should be on selling more to current and past customers. And a great model for how to prioritize your marketing I found in Louis Godima's book, Bullseye Marketing. In the book, he recommends that rather than going after new customers first, which is what so many companies want to do, and a lot of companies ask us to help with that, companies should start their marketing and sales efforts focusing on their current and past customers. So this is the bullseye that he talks about. That's the middle of the bullseye. Focus on selling to them first. It's almost like a pressure test. Sell more to them. Make sure everything's working out. For the second ring of the bullseye, focus your marketing and sales efforts on new customers who are ready to buy right now. Okay, bottom of the funnel. And from a tactical standpoint, that involves arming your sales team with the resources that they can use right now to help prospects who are already engaged with your sales team, but who might need additional information and make their buying decision. We're talking about prospects who already know you, or they've already found your company. And that takes us to the third ring of the bullseye. And that outer ring, he calls it casting a wider net, and nets are going to come up in a minute here. That's the approach for a new customer. That's where you undertake marketing efforts to connect with your prospective customers who might not know who you are and might not even know what your company does. So what are the different ways to generate leads? In survey after survey, one of the top things companies want from their marketing is to generate leads, good leads, better leads. So let's talk about generating leads. In the book From Impossible to Inevitable, Hypergrowth Companies Create Predictable Revenue, Aaron Ross and Jason Lemkin state that lead generation is the number one lever that drives revenue growth. In the book, the authors explain that fast-growing companies have three types of lead generation activities, a sort of a balanced diet of lead generation, if you will. And they also explain that too many companies rely on just one or maybe two of the activities, but unless you do all three, you're just not going to be as effective and you won't grow as fast. And the three types of lead generation are seeds, spears, and nets. Now stay with me. Here's what they mean. Seeds, these are leads that are created from word of mouth, networks, relationships, especially through creating happy customers who refer others. Spears over on the right, those are leads generated by targeted outbound prospecting or business development campaigns, usually working through a targeted list and calling or emailing or using any technique that helps the salesperson get a meeting. And the nets, these are leads generated through marketing campaigns, including, inbound marketing, content marketing, advertising. This is typically the largest generator of leads, but the lead quality can be mixed. There's going to be big fish and little fish in there. So you can see how some companies only do one or two. And many companies rely on just the seeds, current and past customers and referrals, and that's great, but it's not as predictable. And as a company grows, that well can start to go drier and represent an increasing smaller proportion of leads. Spears are a proactive approach, not always as much fun, but they still yield results. And it can become a more predictable source of leads. And the more that a company does this, the better they become at it. And everyone likes to think, oh no, there's some forms of marketing where the leads just come to you. That's not true. I mean, there are some that come to you, but the ones that grow, the ones that are successful, still do predictable prospecting. And believe it or not, outbound spearfishing, as we say, that actually makes your net fishing more effective. In other words, it helps lend focus to the marketing efforts. So you can zero in on attracting the best type of prospect rather than using some sort of spray and pray approach to marketing, or as I sometimes hear it called, random acts of marketing. So in other words, if I know what our ideal customer looks like, I'm then able to aim my marketing more specifically in that direction. The fastest growing companies have a healthy lead generation side of all three approaches. Now, I'm going to explain a couple more things that are important to understand about generating leads with the seeds and the spears and the nets. Now, you may think that Alan Dibb's book, The One-Page Marketing Plan, has a gimmicky name, but don't be fooled by that. It's a terrific book. And marketing plans need not be more detailed than the 9 areas that you can summarize on one page. Now, I don't even know if you can see all this, but and I'm not going to go through all of it, but there's basically 3 sections in his book and how you could organize your marketing plan. And before, that's when prospective customers have never heard of you, all those kinds of things that happen beforehand. During is when they become aware of you, all the way until they decide to buy, which could be much, much later. And after, that's what kind of experience your customers are going to have and how you can sell more to them and what you can do to get referrals. So take a note of that last section. It's in green there. Lots of companies don't include that after part in their marketing plans. A lot of the marketing and sales activity tends to stop at that point. But as I said before, that's faster, generally easier money. Speaking of referrals, in John Jansen's book, The Referral Engine, Teaching Your Business to Market Itself, great book. He notes that in a survey he did in writing the book, he found that about 2/3 of companies said that over half their business came from referrals. Over 50% came from referrals, but 80% of those companies admitted that they had no system of any kind to generate referrals. And it's not that hard. In the book, he shows how to set up a system to generate predictable referrals for your business. Very, very powerful. And in the book I mentioned earlier, Spear Selling by Jamie Shanks, he explains that the single most effective decision a company can make in outbound prospecting and selling is selecting the right accounts. And he also shows how not doing it correctly or not doing it at all, in other words, anything with a pulse, is the most disastrous misstep a company can make in trying to grow. So in the book, he walks you through how to select the right target prospects that will have the biggest impact on your outbound sales efforts in the shortest amount of time. Okay, so you've identified who the primary people you want to connect with are. How do you get a meeting? It's no news that it's getting much more difficult to use the phone and email to get through, not to mention even getting a response. But keep in mind one thing, that in this era, when it's never been more difficult to connect with prospects, it's also never been easier to find out a lot about them using the internet and thousands of digital tools out there. So in Stu Heinek's book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, and his other book, Get the Meeting, he shows hundreds of ways how salespeople, entire sales teams, are using information about prospects, as well as innovative approaches and modern technology to reach the people you want to meet and get them to want to meet with you, and without irritating them. It's just a little bit of thought doesn't really cost a whole lot, and the ROI is just dramatic. So let's talk finally about nets. So as a former New York City ad man, go ahead and laugh, I die a little inside when I see how advertising has become a shadow of its former self. In the good old days, we had captive audiences that, more or less had to pay attention to our clients' messages. That era of easy marketing is dead and gone. And it's all because of technology, obviously, primarily the internet and marketing interruption avoidance technology, which is a very cumbersome term that I've invented. If anyone has a suggestion for something better, please let me know. But like with the example I mentioned earlier about how my dad researched buying a car versus how my wife researched her car, the internet has allowed everyone who's buying something to research a lot of it before going to the seller. And when you combine that with marketing, and sales interruption avoidance technology like caller ID and DVRs and streaming audio and video like Netflix and Spotify, ad blocking software and email spam filters, it's getting easier and easier for your customers to avoid and ignore you. And people are avoiding you. In survey after survey, this is just one, advertising is consistently listed as one of the least trusted sources of information. Now, this one is from Edelman, and they talk about 74% of people actively try to avoid advertising. Now, don't misunderstand me. Advertising has its place in the marketing world. It's just a shadow of its former self. But people still are aggressively trying to avoid it. So now, rather than interrupting what people are interested in, we have to be what people are interested in. So unless you're able to offer something to your prospective customers that's helpful or educational or entertaining, they're going to ignore you. So one last time, let's go to the chat panes, okay? Let's go to the chat panes. Last time, got some good participation going on here. When you do a Google search, you see there, I've got a Google search example. That's lead generation for manufacturers, but it could be anything. It could be something like what your company sells. Tell me this, yes or no? Do you click the results at the top of the page? Okay, I'm seeing Jorgen says no. Dan says no. Ooh, Dana, I'm seeing a lot of no's here. Thank you for why. Okay, why do you not click the results at the top of the page? Because it's paid for. Because it's an ad. Why do you not want to click on an ad? Why? You're looking for relevant content in the header. That's a good answer, Dan. I want to make my own choice. Another answer is because they're trying to sell me something. I'm honest. I'm the same way. Okay, let me ask you this then. Last question. Which links are the ones that you click on a search page, search engine result page? So you said you don't click on the ones that say ad. Which ones do you click on? The ones that highlight my primary search words. Okay, and the ones that don't say ad. Okay, great. So if people like and the most relevant ones, and if people don't like and trust the non-ad links on search engines, just a bit about how to get your site, your website, your company site to show up when your customers are searching the internet. And where this is, entire books have been written about this, but I just wanted to suggest something. What if I told you that the way to get found on the first page of Google for terms your customers are searching for is already in the halls of your company? I mean, believe it or not, you don't have to hire a company like ours. Does your sales team answer a lot of questions? Do they answer a lot of the same questions each day? That is gold to be mined. That is gold to be mined. Manufacturers, here's another thought. Manufacturers have a lot of engineers, technical salespeople, and subject matter experts with deep, deep expertise. That is a gold mine of helpful information for your customers. Don't hide that light under a bushel. Here's why. Teaching is the new pitching. Your customers don't want to be marketed or sold to, and they're increasingly intolerant of it, just like some of the responses you all just put up. But they do want to learn how to make a smart purchase and be more successful. Teaching is the new pitching, and manufacturers have a lot of people with deep subject matter expert who are really good at teaching. getting information out there in various forms. They don't have to be good writers necessarily. In Jay Baer, in his book, Utility, Why Smart Marketing is About Help, Not Hype, he says the difference between helping and selling is just 2 letters. But those 2 letters make all the difference. The more customer questions you answer on your website, the more successful you will be at attracting more traffic to your site, which will generate more interest, trust, leads, and sales. And what's more, the helpful educational information that you put on your site, the more that your sales team can use it in their sales process. So as they help move their customers along to their buying journey. One of my favorite examples is in Marcus Sheridan's book, They Ask You Answer, where he tells how shifting from promoting his fiberglass pool business, they spent a lot of money on advertising. He shifted from that to just teaching his customers everything they need to know to make a smart buying decision. It turned his business around and was later written about in the New York Times. And the New York Times described it as a revolutionary marketing tactic. So in other words, he was writing articles. Any question he ever got from a customer, he put an article on his website. He made videos. And the more that people consume that information, the more trust their trust went up, and their fear of calling him up and doing business with him has gone down. And matter of fact, his company's now becoming one of the largest manufacturers of fiberglass pools. So let's just talk briefly about social media. Just again, entire books have been written about this, but for at least 10 years now, companies have been fascinated with social media and have wanted to jump on the bandwagon. I still get calls from, these marketing folks at manufacturers and other kinds of companies, and they've been, they're usually pretty squared away, but it's like the boss is saying, well, let's go do some of that digital social media thing. It's like a shiny disco ball that attracts a lot of attention. Now, social media is a great thing. It's great for extending your reach of your brand. If your buyer personas are on a particular social media platform, you should consider having a presence there. And social media should definitely have a place in your marketing mix, but there are a couple things I like to remind folks about social media that surprises them sometimes. One is that when you are investing in your company's social media presence on various platforms, you are building a house on rented land. The social media platforms can remove you, and they can completely change the rules if it suits their business model. For instance, Facebook once showed whatever you posted on your company page to all or nearly all the people who liked and followed your company there, the fans. Now, they show what you post there to less than 5% of your fans, and that number is actually going down. So if you want more of your fans or people who follow you on social media to see what you post there, you need to pay Facebook for more exposure. It's Facebook's platform, and you play by their rules, and all social media platforms can and will do this. So in other words, don't go do social media first until you get your website squared away that you own. So in terms of extending your message, it's more helpful to think of social media as a paid platform. Okay, rather than the free media that many people once knew it as. And it's also a great way, social media is really great for very targeted advertising. But for customer acquisition, do you know which tactic studies have shown to be 40% more effective than social media? Anyone want to take a guess? For customer acquisition, which tactic is 40% more effective than social media? Anyone want to take a guess? Big reveal. It's email marketing. Yeah, boring old email marketing. And here's why. With email addresses, your message gets to the recipient without having to go through all the filters of social media. And the recipient sees it when they want to see it. Otherwise, social media is sort of like a passing parade. With an email address that you have earned from a prospect, very important, you earn email addresses from prospects. They are giving you permission to communicate with them and deepen the relationship that they have with you, whether they're a customer or a prospective customer. But there's a catch. Your emails have to be helpful, educational, or entertaining. They have to have some kind of utility for the recipient. If your email is all about your company and products, you're going to be banished, not to hell, but almost to the unsubscribe list. Your emails to your audience that you're trying to build, they must be, they need to aspire to be so good that if you stop sending them, they would be missed. Fortunately, you don't have to pick between social media and email marketing. You can and should use both, but the smart money is on building a strong opt-in list of email subscribers, an audience. So lastly, how can I sell more through channel partners? I hear this from a lot of manufacturers, and there's one book that it's one of my favorite books, and I want to tell you about it. It's called Marketing Multiplied. So a lot of manufacturers market and sell through channel partners. And in the book, Marketing Multiplied, a real-world guide to channel marketing for beginners, practitioners, and executives, the authors recommend a 4-step model for growing your sales through a channel. And I'll walk you through them. It's 2, with, through, and 4. I mean, the simplicity is ingenious, but their whole book is built around that. One of the biggest mistakes, though, that manufacturers or any company that sells through a channel makes, and I see this all the time, is thinking that your channel partners work for you and that they should do what you want them to do and be as interested in selling your product as you are. It just doesn't happen. So the 4 different ones are, they call 2-partner, and that's channel marketing. And it's mainly about providing the partner with the reason to work with you. I mean, keep in mind, they're representing a lot of companies in many instances. It's based, like a lot of sales and marketing, on empathy. You know, it's conveying to them what's in it for them. It's giving them a reason to care and to think about your brand. You know, successful partner marketing is treating your partners like customers, especially after they become a partner. The next one is with partner marketing, and that has you and your channel partner shoulder to shoulder, going to market together. For example, like a seminar where both companies are presenters. You know, both logos are displayed side by side. Both companies drive attendance. You know, together you're selling to the end user. That works in various forms for a lot of companies, but you know, I realize some of you have a different situation in terms of how you organize. The third one is through partner marketing. That's where you give your partners the content and training for them to deliver your message to the market all on their own. You're arming them. It's not being their marketing firm, but you're arming them with information to help them make sales easier. And the last one is for partner marketing, and it's just how it sounds. You market for your partner. Most organizations engage in some level of for partner marketing, but a lot of them do it ineffectively, and they wait to hear from their partners and respond when they ask for something like content or collateral material. It's a very reactive approach. Far more successful is proactive for partner marketing. And quickly, one other thing I hear, and this is the last slide, is that a lot of companies will say, we don't need to market because we market through a channel. And I've heard this not too long ago. And basically, you are putting a lot of the growth of your company and your sales in the hands of someone else who could change their mind. They could get hit by a bus. You are really relying on someone else to bring you the business. And you can actually be generating awareness and interest and leads, and you can actually share those leads with your partners. And there's ways that you can even follow up and say, hey, did you sell to them? There's many ways to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to present today. I hope that what I've covered will help you to better navigate what can be, an overwhelming world of marketing and sales in this kind of new era when customers don't want to be marketed or sold to, but they want to be helped and guided toward the right decision. So if you're interested in keeping up with the latest ideas to help you succeed in the quickly changing world of marketing and sales, go to your favorite podcast app on your phone, like Apple Podcasts, for instance, and subscribe for free to the Marketing Book Podcast. And if I can recommend any marketing or sales books or other resources for whatever situation you find yourself in, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn where we can chat, and I'll try to get you pointed in the right direction. Every day I'm hearing from listeners around the world asking me for, here's my challenge, or this is what could I learn more about this area, that area. A lot of times it's a book, an interview that I've done, but I'm able to help move them along and save them some time. So who has the first question? I'll turn it back over to Yolanda.
So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to place that in the chat, the question and answer, or you can use the raise your hand option.
Okay. And Yolanda, you and Kevin are probably, you've been at shows recently. Are there any kind of vibes out there about what people are looking for help with, or what's what their biggest challenges are as it relates to this.
I think you touched on it before when, at times the person who's now in the sales seat, didn't consider maybe themselves previously to be a salesperson. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that a lot. And there's a lot of people, particularly manufacturers, like an engineer who's suddenly been thrown in, in charge of sales, or like my friend who was suddenly the president of the company and just didn't have a whole lot of background in marketing or sales, maybe technical sales. So um, there's a lot to learn, but you know what? Somebody who hasn't been in this field and maybe didn't study it, I think they have an advantage because they don't have this muscle memory of wanting to shout at people. In other words, if you think of two visuals out there, one of them is a megaphone, and the other one's a magnet. And most people have this urge to want to shout at their customers. Like I talked about the good old days in advertising when we had captive audiences, which we no longer do. They think that people are interested in their products or services, and they want to shout at them, and you can't really buy attention very much anymore. It's really, really difficult. You're now competing with cat videos for people's attention. Pictures of your friends' kids at college graduation, that type of thing. The successful companies are the ones that are treating their marketing as a magnet that's pulling people towards them and is being helpful and educational. And I'll give you an example. Sadly, my wife is a horse person, and I don't know how anybody would advertise to reach her, but she's always researching issues related to her horse and competition and all that sort of thing. And there are companies out there that are not saying buy our saddles. They're saying, here's how to make sure you don't get ripped off on your next saddle. Here's how to make sure your saddle is properly fitted. See how they're offering useful information? So she finds this stuff by searching around, or maybe somebody shares it on social, whatever. She subscribes to their newsletter or starts finding this information. And I can tell you, Yolanda, it works because I see those companies in the credit card statement each month. This really does work. So let's go to Dana. When you are selling a highly technical or niche product, which techniques do you recommend? Well, let me ask you a follow-up question if you're still on the line. Are you selling to engineers or technical people? Okay, so the answer is yes. Engineers are even more suspicious of marketing than the average consumer is. There's a great book that was on the podcast written by my friend Rebecca Geyer, Smart Marketing for Engineers. They're the ones that I had a couple slides from their study. And they talk about how they want information, and they want information from another technical person. So remember when I said that, you've got a lot of great people working in your company, like technical experts. If you make videos of them, or that they have a supervised writing some buying guide, if they know it's coming from a person similar to them, they're going to trust that. But here's another answer, and this applies to anybody in marketing, Dana. Stop talking about your product first. There's a whole nother presentation I've done in the past, and happy to do it for you guys in the future if you like. It's called Stop Talking About Your Product First. Your customers are not looking for your product. They're looking for the solution to a problem. And the more that you're able to address what their problem is, remember back to the buyer personas I was talking about? The more that you touch on that just a little bit, the more successful you're going to be. And I'll give you an example. When we go and do the buyer persona interviews for new customers, and it's the same way that she shows in the book, and we've actually had some additional training from her. But it's a 20, 30-minute interview, and one of my employees, who's a former journalist, ex-journalists make for great marketing people these days, you just go through and you try to probe for those 5 areas. We come back to the client, and they always say two things, basically. First off, they say, man, you guys really understand our customers. And we kind of have to laugh and say, well, thanks, but we just followed the process that we told you about. And you really understand what their hopes and their dreams and what their concerns are. The other thing that's very interesting about that buyer persona is that when we do a workshop with a client, and we always have salespeople and customer-facing people there, we want to get what are the questions you always get from your customers? Remember that they ask, you answer. That's a gold mine. If you could start answering a lot of the questions your customers are asking on your website, you're going to do a whole lot better. If your company becomes more of a teacher than a marketer and promoter, you're going to do better. But when we do those buyer persona interviews, that's, remember I said that the first 57% or 60% or 70% is before the buyer reaches out to the seller? Well, most of the questions we get from clients, there are more questions about what happens after the customer's involved with you, after they've kind of reached out to you. And that's fair and that's good. The buyer persona interviews really shed a lot of light on that first 60, 70%. And if you focus your content and information on that, solving those kinds of problems, again, it's an unfair advantage. So Dana, I hope that was helpful. Are there any other questions, or let me know if I didn't answer it, or and again, happy to, if you connect on LinkedIn, I'm happy to point you guys to any other resources that I know of. So if there no other questions, I want to respect your time, and I guess we'll turn it back to Yolanda and Kevin. Thanks very much again for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Douglas. We really appreciate you presenting for us today. As a reminder, this webinar will be posted on the ACER's website. Give us a few days to make sure we get it all copied and downloaded, but it will be available for members to access. And we will be sending out surveys, so if you will please give us your feedback about today's webinar and suggestions for any future webinars, we would certainly appreciate it. And with that, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. And again, thank you, Douglas.
My pleasure. Thank you.